Around 1457, before Christ, the Egyptian Pharaoh Thutmose III led his army into one of the most famous battles of the ancient world, the Battle of Megiddo. This strategic confrontation took place in the fertile valley near the city of Megiddo, where Thutmose's forces faced the combined army of Canaanite city-states. Today, we explore the movements, tactics, and the legendary march that changed history forever, around 1457. Before Christ, as the dust of the Egyptian march settled, Thutmose III's campaign entered its most decisive phase. The pharaoh, young yet already a seasoned commander, had taken a daring gamble. Instead of following the safer southern or northern routes, he chose the narrow central pass of Aruna. This choice was bold, even reckless, for the path was so tight that his men could only proceed in single file. Any ambush could have crushed them. Yet Thutmose's faith in speed, surprise, and discipline turned this maneuver into a stroke of genius. As the Egyptian army emerged from the pass, the Canaanite coalition was caught off guard. The enemy had fortified positions near Megiddo, expecting the pharaoh to take a longer and more predictable route. Instead, Thutmose appeared suddenly, his forces assembled with astonishing speed on the plain. This tactical brilliance would shape the entire battle to come. The coalition of Canaanite princes, led by the king of Kadesh, commanded a diverse host, chariots, infantry, and levies from dozens of rebellious city-states. They fought not only to resist Egyptian domination, but also to defend their autonomy and wealth. For them, Megiddo was more than a battlefield. It was the gate to freedom. But for Egypt, it was the key to empire. Control of Megiddo meant control of trade routes, wealth, and influence across the Levant. On the morning of battle, the Egyptians arranged themselves with meticulous order. Thutmose positioned his chariots at the forefront, supported by disciplined infantry behind. The pharaoh himself, clad in shining armor and standing proudly in his war chariot, is said to have taken a direct role in the fight, inspiring his men with courage. Egyptian scribes later recorded his valor, describing him as a falcon, striking swiftly at his prey. The clash began with the thunder of hooves and the rattle of wheels. Egyptian chariots surged forward, loosing arrows as they advanced. The disciplined formations held their ground as the chaotic ranks of the coalition faltered. Dust rose high above the plain, the cries of men and horses echoing across the valley. Thutmose's tactics unfolded with precision. He pressed the enemy center while his wings enveloped their flanks. Soon, panic swept through the Canaanite lines. The coalition soldiers, overwhelmed by the speed and coordination of the Egyptians, broke ranks and fled toward the fortified city of Megiddo. But here lay their greatest mistake. In their desperation, they abandoned their chariots and supplies outside the city gates, scrambling to climb the walls and shut themselves inside. What should have been an orderly retreat turned into a disaster. The Egyptians, seizing the moment, captured enormous spoils, hundreds of chariots, thousands of horses, and vast quantities of gold, bronze, and weapons. Yet Thutmose made one critical error of his own. Rather than storming the gates immediately, his men stopped to plunder the enemy camp. This pause allowed the defenders to close the gates of Megiddo and prepare for a siege. For 7 long months, the Egyptians encircled the city. Siege works were built, supplies were cut off, and relentless pressure mounted on those trapped inside. At last, hunger and despair broke the resistance. the rulers of the Canaanite cities were forced to surrender, crawling out to bow before the Pharaoh. In a gesture of clemency, Thutmose spared their lives but took their sons as hostages to Egypt, ensuring loyalty through the next generation. The victory at Megiddo was more than a single triumph. It cemented Egypt's supremacy in the region for centuries. Thutmose III became known as the Napoleon of the ancient world, a master strategist whose campaigns extended Egyptian influence farther than ever before. His name, carved into temple walls and inscribed in victory stelae, echoed through history as the embodiment of pharaonic power. The Battle of Megiddo stands as the first recorded battle in history, preserved by Egyptian scribes with remarkable detail. It tells us not only of swords and chariots, but of the daring decisions and human mistakes that shaped destiny. In that fertile valley, beneath the shadow of Megiddo's walls, the future of an empire was decided. In the aftermath of Megiddo, silence hung heavy across the battlefield. The once proud coalition of Canaanite kings, united in defiance of Egypt, now bowed in submission. Their fortresses, once symbols of defiance, opened their gates not by force, but through necessity. One by one they brought tribute, gold, chariots, and hostages, offering submission to the Pharaoh who had outmaneuvered them all. What began as resistance to Egyptian power ended as a spectacle of surrender. For Thutmose III, this was not merely a military triumph. It was the birth of an empire, forged in blood and discipline. At Megiddo, Egypt secured more than a battlefield. It secured influence over the very heart of Canaan, a network of cities and trade routes that now bent to the Nile. Tribute flowed southward, enriching temples, palaces, and armies. Egypt, for the first time, stood as a true imperial power in the Near East. The victory resonated far beyond the walls of Megiddo. Thutmose III was elevated not only as a king, but as a divine figure, a man chosen by the gods to crush rebellion and extend Egypt's light over foreign lands. Priests declared his victory as the will of Amun, the great god of Thebes, whose favor made Egyptian arms invincible. The pharaoh's image was carved into temple walls, not as a mere warrior, but as a living embodiment of order triumphing over chaos. Strategically, Megiddo became the perfect demonstration of brilliance. Thutmose's bold decision to march through the dangerous mountain pass, his patience in siege warfare, and his ability to maintain discipline among his troops revealed a master of logistics and psychology. Scribes recorded every detail, ensuring that future generations would study not just the glory, but the method. Egypt had produced not simply a conqueror, but a tactician whose example would endure for millennia. Megiddo itself transformed into a legend. To the people of Canaan, it was a scar that reminded them of Egyptian dominance. To Egypt, it became a trophy of destiny, a name that carried the weight of inevitability. The city's very name would echo through time, evolving across languages and cultures until it became the Armageddon of later traditions, a place where ultimate battles, divine or earthly, were imagined to unfold. Few battlefields in human history have cast such a long shadow. For Thutmose III, the victory secured more than territory. It secured immortality. He was no longer merely the heir of past pharaohs. He was the pharaoh of destiny. Generals whispered of his genius. Priests sanctified his memory, and scribes immortalized him as the Napoleon of Egypt, though centuries before Napoleon himself. With Megiddo, he did not simply win a war, He created a template for empire. Yet beyond the pomp of temples and scrolls, there was something deeper. The battle revealed the truth of power, that unity can crumble, that boldness can change the course of history, and that a single decision on a single day can shift the fate of nations. The Canaanites, once defiant, learned that their strength lay fractured. The Egyptians, once a kingdom of the Nile, now understood that they were destined to rule a wider world. And so Megiddo remained more than a place. It became an idea, the first recorded great battle, the archetype of conquest, the beginning of Egypt's dominance in the ancient Near East. Even today, when we speak of decisive battles, when we imagine the clash of armies shaping the destiny of civilizations, we are still, in some way, speaking of Megiddo. The dust has long since settled, the voices of warriors long since faded, but the memory endures. The story of Megiddo reminds us that history is not merely written by the victors, but etched into the very stones of the earth. It reminds us that the echoes of one battle can ripple through thousands of years, shaping not only the memory of nations, but the imagination of humankind itself. Megiddo was not the end, it was the beginning. And in that beginning lies the eternal legacy of Thutmose III, pharaoh, warrior, empire builder, and immortal name in the Chronicles of war.